I'm Danny Dunson, and this is how I create.
Welcome to This Is How We Create, a show that digs deeper into the creative life of contemporary artists of color. Discover what feeds their creativity and how they found or are finding their artistic voice. Through these intimate and candid conversations, you'll gain insights into the lives of creative professionals of color that are hard to find anywhere else. In today's episode, art historian Danny Dunson reflects on how society affects our views of the world, our views of ourselves, and how those views influence the art that we produce. Dunson shares how growing up in Gary, Indiana shaped the person he has become. Studying abroad in Ghana helped him understand and experience what art looks like when it is removed from the Western gaze. Danny shares so much during our time together that we've broken it up into two different parts. So you guessed it, part one and part two. So sit tight and put on your headphones or sit somewhere comfortable. And this is a really great conversation, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as I did. All right, see you soon. Today on the podcast, we have Danny Dunson. Danny Dunson is an art historian, an art advisor, curator, and writer. Oh, and he's the founder of the famed IG account LegacyBros, and most recently, co-founder and editor-in-chief of ArtX. Dunson graduated from the University of Illinois at Chicago, earning a BA in art history from the School of Art and Art History. He is a 2016 Fulbright Grant recipient and Gilman Scholarship Fellow. His research as an art historian has primarily focused on figurative representations within an African diasporic art. Dunson's academic writing is situated within an interdisciplinary dialogue, engaging with intersections of critical and social theory, colonial and post-colonial studies, gender and women's studies, and queer studies. His writing has been published in exhibition catalogs, magazines, and online journals. In June 2017-18, Dunson presented In Memoriam, Portraits of the Middle Passage in Situ, a large-scale exhibition in the dungeons of Ghana's Cape Coast Castle Museum featuring art of the Ancestor Project, a visual art collective with Ghanaian artist Kwame Akoto-Bamfo at the helm. Dunson is currently conducting research that interrogates portraiture and figurative compositions aligned with space, place, memory, and the middle passage. As an editor-in-chief of ArtX, Dunson helps shine a light on a multitude of diverse voices in the world of art, especially those typically unheard. Hi, Danny, welcome.
Hi. So happy to be here.
I am so pleased to have you here. I have to say that I was so inspired by you, and you are one of I didn't tell you this before, but you really spurred me to start the podcast.
Really?
They say that, yeah. So they say that, you have mentors you've never met before and people you've never met before, but you keep them close to you because they inspire you. And I think I'm misquoting Toni Morrison, but she said, you create the things that you want to see. And I had the idea for this podcast for a long time, and I discovered your IG, LegacyBros, and I thought, okay, it's time. I felt that it was a wake-up moment for me because I kept wanting to see this thing where artists of color would come together and would just we could just be in conversation, right? And
Yes.
I saw your work and I thought, well, there's a catalog for me, living and dead.
Wow.
Of artists. Yeah. And
That means a lot to hear. Wow, thank you. I really appreciate that. Now, I should let you know I'm an emotional crybaby wreck, so you can't speak to me too sweetly, or we won't have a good conversation. I'll be in tears.
Oh, well, okay, I'll try.
Right? Yeah.
Well, I wanted to start with your childhood. You are the son of a preacher.
I am the son of a preacher man. Absolutely.
And you grew up in Gary, Indiana during a really special time, right?
primarily amongst just a lot of Black folks. Can you tell me what that was like?
I'm so happy that I've mentioned that aspect of my life in different times I've spoken. Yes, so I grew up in Gary, Indiana in the 80s and 90s. And Gary, Indiana is, though it is in Indiana, it's was always considered a suburb of Chicago, Illinois, roughly about a half an hour drive. So for those people in Chicago where I live now, they just consider me a Chicagoan because literally I was in the city of Chicago twice a week because of the short commute. But Gary, Indiana was predominantly about a 98, I would say 98%, 99% Black town, African American town, with very few different types of intersections. I wasn't really familiar with like the Afro Latinx community or the Afro Caribbean community. I didn't know much of African immigrants and US citizens. It was just a very traditional, from the South, African American experience who migrated to the northern states. And it became a majority Black town in the late 70s. And it was the second city in the United States to elect an African American mayor. And it experienced something that we called in real estate and also economic business and urban development, white flight. It's when Blacks are showing that they are empowering themselves economically and numerically in a place that they leave and drop everything. So the city, literally within a few years, all of the businesses had closed, shut down, and left the people who were already marginalized to try to build up a new community. So it was insane. However, through that struggle, I got to grow up around everyone that looked like me. I knew Black millionaires. I saw Black homeless people. I saw Black people who were judges, doctors, my dad's and fraternity brothers, my mom's friends, and different church members, and HBCU, every historically Black college. I knew it all. And then at the same time, I knew there were people who were in gangs. There are people who were on drugs trying to grapple with life. So I saw every strata of life, that stratified layering that's so complex in the human experience, I got to experience through the lens of Blackness. So I always knew it was not monolithic. And I'll just say this, it's really difficult to see the police brutality right now in cities that are maybe more integrated now, or just a lot of the things that I grew up with, for instance, with the cops being primarily all Black in the 80s and 90s in Gary, Indiana. My biggest fear would be if one were to pull me over, is that I look so much like my father, they would know. They're like, oh my God, you're Glenn's son, or I'm going to call him right now. That's what I was afraid of. I wasn't being afraid of even being called the N-word, let alone violence against me, physical or any kind of violence. So it was somewhat of a privilege. And I think Gary now is a very impoverished city. It's down to its bare bones, like many cities in Michigan and other places where the deindustrialization really took hold and left people unemployed for decades and still are. It's sad to see it come to that, but there is a reason for that. It reminds me of the great nation of Haiti. When people look at Haiti, so I get emotional about Haiti because people don't always discuss the deep history with their liberation and the cost of having to pay France year after year, completely depleting all of their economic resources for their freedom to move about, to live for themselves, and to be a Black nation. So they go, oh, Haiti is so poor, it's so dirty. And Gary is the same way. They had to pay a huge cost to be liberated from Jim Crow. The home where my parents live now is in Miller Beach. It's still a very beautiful neighborhood. My parents were some of the first Blacks to move into that neighborhood. Across the street, my dad's mother cleaned the house of the white doctor across the street from my home that I grew up in. That was the rich doctor and lawyer neighborhood. It still kind of is. And when my family moved in, that doctor across the street moved out about 6 months later. But then all of the wealthier Blacks moved to that part of the city. and it became another class system type of thing. And I guess it still is, but that goes to show the segregation was really real. And when you stand up in your belief of yourself and you demand your humanity, a lot of times there's a cost for it. But I'd rather pay that cost like Haiti has and live in my freedom than have to beg someone to realize that I am Black and of value. You don't have to do that. You just have to know it for yourself.
Well, you know, I grew up in Haiti, and it's something very different to
Wait,
be.
I didn't remember that.
No way. I thought you were trying to
Seriously,
be kind.
no. I
I'm
told you,
Haitian, born and raised.
now that you say it, I remember it, but honestly, it completely blocked my mind. I associate you with France and I associate you with the UK, and I know that you speak. I really thought you were from Senegal.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, probably I
That's
am,
what I was
right?
thinking.
Yeah.
Right. But I thought directly from. I didn't know you were from. It's not okay. Wow, that was a moment. Honestly, I didn't even. Okay, I'm gonna try not to get emotional again.
Yeah, I mean, we Haitians were so proud about that, about the fact that we fought back. And it's a thing that we were tenacious in that manner. But it's so enriching to grow up around a lot of other Black people and to see the breadth of what we can do, tab or something, right? Because, you know,
Yes,
like you then just have to start everything up again in terms of going up
because
the
nothing you
ladder.
did counted. Right before you got here, it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
So you have to start over, which is horrible. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to keep everything on you and talk a little bit about how that experience of being around such a large cross section of Black people and Black experiences and seeing what is possible. How did that influence you and the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, it has a direct and acute influence on the work that I'm doing now. Fundamentally, and different iterations and modalities of those same underlying concepts and frameworks to how I approach my work within art history, within curation, within any kind of writing, be it a journalistic style or an essay or some type of marketing piece. I am interested in highlighting, bringing to the forefront, not elevating because it's already elevated. I don't like that word when we're using it ad nauseum right now. But I am bringing to the forefront the humanity of Black people that is so oppressed to that we're thinking of ourselves as bodies only. We're thinking of ourselves as these mechanized, hustling, grinding, working. I'll sleep when I'm dead, get the money, don't worry about anything else. And I'm saying some very general terms. This is not everyone, but I'm reiterating a master narrative that is outside of us, that comes from white supremacy, that comes from white superiority complex, that comes from racism, that comes from colonialization and enslavement, and the encounter in which one person met another group of people and decided to no longer consider these people human and use them for the building, the structuring, the framing, the legs of the table that they sit on called capitalism. And if anything, people who are considered, who are interested in having a seat at that table have to understand that if you're a Black person, you can't have a seat at that table because you are holding the table up. If they pull you from the bottom, the table will shift. And the fear of that table shifting is what keeps the Black human experience in their mind at the bottom. And we have to decide to make our own structures to let that table completely fall, even though it has all of our blood, sweat, and tears and narratives within it. But the larger narrative is your human value, your life. So that being said, when I exhibited in Memoriam portraits of the Middle Passage in Situ, which was the art of the Ancestor Project, led by the principal artist and director, Kwame Akoto-Bamfo. I encountered Kwame by working on this project where I was going through Ghana for over a year, and I think a year and 4 months total between 3 years' time. I had gone back and forth, and I was surveying cemeteries in Ghana. When I entered a cemetery in Ghana, which is something else that happens in Haiti, and it's also something that happens in other Caribbean cultures, which, as well as Brazil and South American cultures, where you enter a cemetery and there are pictures of the dead on the tombs, or there are mosaics, paintings, sculptures of symbols such as animals or geometric shapes that symbolize a person's status or who they are. And when I entered this very small cemetery in a village where I was visiting, I looked around and it was just so beautiful. I don't like cemeteries in the West, in the US, they scare me. But these mounds that had stones with an image of someone just invited me to come and look at all of these different pictures, as if I was thumbing through my family album of ancestors and people that I had never met. So we say things like slave ships, we say things like slaves, we say things like, oh, the slaves were brought over. Even using that word completely X's out that these were people, these were humans. They were mothers, fathers, daughters, brothers, uncles, godparents, chiefs, professors, doctors, seamstresses, tailors, maids, whatever the case may be. They were functioning with a very complex intellectual, spiritual, and creative society. And they were completely disrupted from that, completely taken away from that, and dispersed throughout the new world to basically build a brand new economy. So when I came across the sculptures that Kwame had been making for over 4 to 6 years of nothing but the neck of the person to the head. So it was a bust from the neck up. And he sculpted these out of concrete, which is a hard material, but it's not unbreakable. It's tough, but it can break. With these expressions of people maybe doing their hair, there'd be a woman with half of her hair braided and half unbraided. And when I asked him, I said, why? He said, oh, perhaps she was stolen right in the middle of her grooming. And then I said, God, this one face looks like anticipating something's about to happen, the moment before the moment. All of these micro expressions Kwame had been able to capture, and they were just the neck to the head, where the brain exists, where the trauma exists, where humanity exists. Our thinking abilities, our complex emotional systems are different from any other being on this earth, and it's what makes us humans. However, when we talk about slavery and when we talk about Black people in modern times, we spend too much time saying this phrase called the Black body. And very intellectual, my colleagues within the academy or within the art industry or any other type of creative and academic or social type of activism say this term Black bodies. And it's a shorthand. It's meant to encapsulate everything. But words have a certain charge to them. So when you constantly say something like, the police are just killing these Black bodies, and Black bodies are experiencing health disparities, and Black people, you have to put that on there, because we're the only group that gets reduced to that. And I understand that there's a system that's saying that, you're just a body, but we have to stand up and say, Black people, Black humans. It doesn't, your skin and your hair does not change that human designation. And I believe that we have been indoctrinated to lose our own humanity and interpersonally create these violences against each other within the intimacy of our own communities. So because the master narrative is telling me I'm not human, I can refer to a woman as a bitch. I can use the word, the N-word. I can do all these things that literally equate to dogs and derogatory slurs that were created outside of me, but I've taken it on as terms of endearment. And it's something that I can only say, but every time I say that word, I am emphasizing the flesh and bone And I'm completely erasing the mind, the spirit, the creativity, the spirituality, everything that really makes me human. You can have what you want with this body. If it was up to the body, Black people would not be existing today. They did everything against our bodies. They mutilated us, they raped us, they sold us, to this day, shooting us down. But the spirit of Black people is what's inside the mind. It's not this skin. It's not this dark complexion that we love so much. I love the melanin. I love my tightly coiled hair. But that is something that the white supremacy has made racial difference. But you can't allow that to make humanity difference, to allow yourself to be subhuman. So when we say something like, oh, that's for white people, and this is for Black people, and it's usually something higher up that's for white people, right? They go whitewater rafting or jumping off mountains. We don't do that. And then it's like, well, maybe if we did that and actually just liked it, maybe it's just a human experience we can all have. So we're moving within these constrictions of a master narrative that was not written by us, but yet we're governed. So we don't need the slave chains anymore. We don't even need a jail cell so much because we're policing ourselves. So I'm going to wrap it up and say with Kwame's exhibition, with it focusing on these 1,200 sculptures, which I believe there are even more now, of just the heads. What happens when you put this many sculptures in Cape Coast Castle within the dungeons? We separated them, the women in the women's dungeon, or they said female. That's another thing. I don't say females because an animal can be a female. A plant can be a female. The only thing that can be a man or a woman or anything non-gender binary is a human, right? So in the women's dungeon, we put the women and then we put the men and all the different ages and all those that may have been not easily gendered. We put in different areas because we believe all these multiple identities existed even back then. So what happens when you see these faces? So when a person such as myself sees this sculpture with this horrified face, I'm looking at the trauma that's happened. I'm looking at the true experience, not the whipping, not the beating, not even getting in the ship. The trauma that happens the moment your life, your humanity is disrupted is more violent than anything that's going to happen to my flesh. It's the mental anguish, the emotional anguish. And this allowed people to see themselves in a different way. So when a white person, a woman who was from Amsterdam, saw the show and she was just staring at a sculpture, she stood there for a good 30 minutes. I looked at her and she smiled when she got to the sculpture. And then she started crying after about 30 minutes. And it was because after a while, the coily hair, the rich melanin, the wider nose or fuller lips or beautiful eyes, all of that disappears. All you see is another face looking back at you, and something horribly has happened to this other person. So it allows you to relate to this as a human experience. Though it was cloaked in another skin or another language or another geographic location, you have to put yourself within the experience of another human. And that's why racism exists this way, because it's so easily separated. And I'll finally say on this, when people are asking us to create diversity in our corporate meetings and tell me about Black pain, I've had friends to just call and some of my white friends and want to know more about what I've been through so they can understand. You don't have to know anything about Blackness. You don't have to know anything about my life to see what happened to George Floyd and be completely horrified and very angry. If you saw that video clip of any of these happenings, by the way, there's been tons that we have film of. If you are a white person or anyone, you saw that clip, you woke up, you ate your breakfast, you kissed your wife or your partner, your husband, and your child, and went to work like nothing happened, you are fundamentally racist. Because the only way you could see yourself in that is if you looked like that. Why do I have to look like you for you to understand that I'm human? If it had been someone that looked like you, or if it had been a child, easily we can get into the situation of, oh my God, that happened to a baby. Well, guess what? We're all babies in adult bodies. So a human is a human, and we're all that precious. So I am against this idea of Black people doing the labor to help white people gain their humanity. That's a project that you have to do on your own because you're the one who sold it before you started selling us.
I don't know at which point I should drop the mic. I don't. But you bring up something that to me is really interesting because as an image maker who usually works with global brands, and we're trying to tell the story of that brand and do it in such a way that is universal, where it's everything is about the human experience. What I've come to realize is that in some cases, for whatever reason, doing a project that puts people of color in front of the frame, whether they're hiking or kayaking, seems a little bit less believable and less relatable. And I've been trying to understand why that's so. Why it isn't just about the human experience, and why is it that, or somebody who seems white or passing, whatever it is, right? Somebody who is white or lighter skin in front of the camera, that will make white people be able to relate. And you point out something that's really interesting, because then it's not about the human experience. It should be, because we're all the same. Like, and if you, we're all the same. And it sounds ridiculous to say that we are all humans. Right. And so because we're all humans, why are we having this discussion? Why can't you just see this person and see the story and see the story that we're trying to tell and be able to relate? And I haven't yet been able to articulate this well enough. I feel like I should write a white paper or something.
We have to understand that this was an economic project. The type of racism that's experienced in America comes about, at least within the media and the way we personally experienced it here, more intensified or in different ways than people experience racism throughout Europe and other places throughout the world. Racism is global, and it's something that everyone has experienced. However, there's a peculiarity that's associated with the racism, the racist project of the United States, because also there's something peculiar about the way the United States was created. It was founded in devastation, destruction, extinction. They were just taking over, killing masses of people, all for economic gain. So we have to consider ourselves a part of that economic gain. And what happens if I consider you human? I lose my money is what they're afraid of, because they can't see past the hundreds of years of a tradition that says suppress this one so you can elevate yourself. They can't see past that because that's the system that's been going on for so long, for well over 240 years. So here we are grappling with that because they're afraid, if I look at you equal, what's going to happen to me? Wait a minute. And they don't understand that more is always better when it comes to, someone having a chance, someone having their rights and their freedoms. It would only make things stronger. But there has to be healing on their side. And this is an internal community healing that they have to deal with, just like we have to start healing ourselves. Because honestly, I don't believe racism will ever end. I think we'll always have it. I think we'll always have poverty. I think we'll always have sick people. I think we'll always have different issues. But in the meantime, while racism is trying to get itself together by those people who commit it, those who are the victims of it, those who are feeling the oppression and the blows of it, we have to come together. And we have to heal ourselves. No, it's not our fault. None of this is our fault. However, it's still our responsibility to heal, maintain, improve, and get away from as much of it as possible. So it's a slap in the face. It really is. But I'd rather take that one slap than go back and get the other slapped again, trying to beg them to see that my life matters. It's not going to happen. I'm sorry. If it mattered, like I said in one of my quotes, if they didn't know already your life mattered, they wouldn't be so actively and aggressively trying to stomp your life out. They know it matters. This isn't about mattering. This is a moral decision that says, I have to keep you down. I have to step on you. So I have to keep my knee in your neck, because if you get up, I'm going to lose something. I can't let you get up. I know you're amazing. You're kings and queens. I know, look how beautiful you are. I know that. I wish I looked like you most days. But even then, I can't have that happening. I have to stay at the top of this paradigm. That's what this is about. This is not about ignorance, people.
It's about power.
Power in the moral decision. It really is about wrong or right. We know, do not kill someone. By the age of 5 or 6, you know you're not supposed to hurt someone. You know you're not supposed to hit, take, or steal. You're supposed to share. And by the time you would at least become a preteen, 12 or 13, you know of all of the consequences of jail and prison. And you know of these things. Everyone around the world knows, no matter what religion, no matter what ethics you have, no matter what sense of morality that's within your culture. Everyone teaches everyone, don't kill anyone. Why is it okay for us to die ad nauseum, repeatedly, in broad daylight, by someone who's paid by the government, local, federal? That's okay. It's not about knowledge. It's not about ignorance. It's about the fact that deep-seated reality that every person who's not Black knows, if I give them a chance, I might lose my power, and I won't let that happen. So Blacks, or all those intersections in between, who are adjacent with or don't want to consider themselves, but I'm calling you Black as well, all of us together have to know our power for ourselves. If you're waiting for the enemy to tell you you're powerful, you are already dead. When
That's so
David went
true.
against
Yeah.
Goliath, he was not looking to Goliath to tell his little self he's powerful. He would have failed if he was waiting for that giant to say, look at you, little man, you're as powerful as I am. That's never going to happen. He would have waited till the ends of time. He had to take it within his own hands, take his power back. And what did he do? He took the knowledge of himself back. It wasn't about the slingshot, for those who know the biblical parable and the story and the Old Testament of David with this little slingshot, a shepherd boy, the youngest of all his brothers, and he rounds up this slingshot and he kills the enormous giant that was coming to take over the town. David had a moment in which he realized, scared or not, small or not, whatever the situation was going to be, he was not going to let this thing take over. And he took his tiny little rock and hit it right in the middle of Goliath's head, and it fell. We have to be that rock. We have to be that hand. We have to be that will, that body, that face, that mind that says, you're not going to take this. I'd rather die before I let you take this. And that kind of bravery, it goes against the regime. Goliath represents an entire narrative of oppression. And instead of trying to work with that oppression and accommodate it and thinking you're going to be able to grow as tall as Goliath and then you'll knock it down. No, we have the power right now. In fact, we always did. So let's return to that.
Yes. And well, first, before we move on, I thought I didn't know your father, Danny, but I would say that you are completely your father's son.
Wow, you just said something that just really triggers a really beautiful emotion. But yeah, and I thank goodness that I have an example of a father who not only raised us and just took care of us and made sure we were financially and physically and had all of our resources met, but my father's presence was there. My parents were married for 46 years before my father passed away. My mom still lives in the family home. It's a huge house. She's not going to leave that place. That's fine. Even though I tried to get her to find something smaller, but my parents worked diligently to instill that pride. They had to reteach us every day the opposite of what that master narrative was trying to teach us. So that's where I get to art, because I think Black art is, for Black people, it's one of those things that proves our existence in spite of everything. So when you look at an artifact after someone's gone, something like an archaeological or anthropological artifact, you're looking at bones or cooking utensils or teeth or whatever the case may be that shows they existed. When we think of Black cultural production, and one of those things being visual art, it's this amazing moment where not only does it show of our existence, but it reiterates back to us our own beauty. So the maker and the object becomes edified at the same time. So I've always been moved by art from many different movements, from the Western canon to non-Western canons to contemporary discourse on art, because I feel like it's the presence of a spiritual force. I feel like if you don't believe in God or anything higher power, I get along with everyone. But for me, proof of God is what God's people are able to create. If you want to see God, you have to be able to see it in the person next to you. So that's what angers me when a police kneels on the neck of God and kills it. That representation. You can't see God in another human, and that's easy to do if you don't consider that Black body a human. So I just reduced it down to a Black body. That's, oh, it's not human, so that's not even God. That's not even a spiritual being. But when I revert that back and I look at all of the magnificent work that we've done in the visual field as artists, performance art, of course, music, dance, poetry, acting, whatever the case may be, literary arts, poet, it just goes on because that's where our humanity is. So I'm a documenter of that humanity. I am an analyzer of that humanity. I unpack it, I grapple with it. I've looked at it since I was, goodness, 5 or 6, and my mother first took me to the museum, and I couldn't stop staring at paintings. My father has, they're still there, that's been now bequeathed to me, this glorious library of countless books, wall-to-wall books in my parents' living room. And it's the library, and everyone knows that if you want a book, you go to the Dunson's house. So my father would hate to give away his books because he knew he might not see it again, but he would do it anyway. And when I was a kid, I would climb the shelves, and I found a book on the famous Impressionist artist Renoir, who was a French painter. And I would look at those images, and I would start scribbling my crayons to draw his figures next to my father's very expensive book. And then I started drawing through all of my dad's book. This is before I could read. So I've always been interested in the image with the word. So my parents fostered this. And I talk about my dad a lot because he's not here anymore. And it helps me to keep his memory alive, and my mannerisms and my voice and this cadence that you hear that sounds somewhere between an educated Southern Baptist preacher, or even my parents were Methodist, and it's just very familiar to a lot of people. But my mother was just as diligent. My mother is the intellectual. My mother is the creative. Anything you needed made by hand or by mind, she was going to do it. She proved and edited all of my father's sermons, which would be pages. She typed them up. He would be writing for weeks, and then maybe around midnight, he'll finally say, "Joyce, it's done." And she would wake up, dust off the typewriter, and begin her work. And first, she had to redline everything of my father's grammar. And then they would argue about sentence syntax and all of these things. My mother is this fastidious grammatician. She cannot stand it. I would get a hit on the hand if I didn't conjugate a verb right. It wasn't about swearing, even though I didn't curse, still don't curse in front of my mom, but if I said the wrong tense, that was going to get a hit. Like, they were very much disciplined in that way. But that partnership, and to this day, my mother edits a lot of the things. She edits my Instagram captions. She's like, you misspelled this, you're typing too fast. I'm like, Mama, I have fat thumbs. She's like, look, you did that wrong. You have 55,000 followers. I'm not going to let you have this caption without a comma in it. And not. So my mother now does that work with me.
She's your copywriter.
She's my copywriter. So I know that's a part of her love language. And I know that was something that started, 40-something years ago with them. And I'm a product of both of them so much. The decor, the clothes, that's my mom. Anything that's aesthetic. And my mother was an artist. She could paint. My dad was the very spiritual, also the writer, the orator, all of those things. So they come together in me. And I'm very blessed because of that. Thank you for mentioning my dad and my parents. That means a lot to me.
As a parent myself, I always think of it like you want to create you want to make sure that you plant your kids in the best soil possible so that they can grow strong. I want to talk about why I really was inspired by you is because I feel like we have some of the favorite artists. I like when I went on your page, I was like, oh my God, he loves Toyin too. Oh, there's Lynette's work.
Oh.
I went to the Jack Shaman gallery, maybe it was 2 years ago, and I was just browsing and something told me go that night. And she was there for a talk.
I was there that night.
No way. Yes.
I
What?
must have, it was the hottest night because the Jack Shaman, both locations were just filled with so many people. And we were all sweating because it was very humid in New York. I did not know you were there that evening.
Every few months I head to New York because I want to see who are the new artists and I want to show my support in one way or another. I see that there's this thing that's happening and I know it's always been happening, but all of these artists that are coming up, I'll be in Australia. I was in Australia and there was an exhibit of Michael Armitage's work and that was amazing. In Lynette, I always mispronounce her name. It's Lynette Yadom Boache. Boache is written, and I've listened to every YouTube video that's out there that's mentioned her because of her use of color.
Yes.
And so she talks about how she doesn't have a true black in her work. She really uses, what did she say? She uses blues and browns to create her black.
Tons of layering. There's a lot of pigment layering.
There's so much pigment layering.
James Marshall, they layer so many colors to get this brownness or this blackness. And if I can talk about Lynette, I'm not vocal about who a favorite artist is. People ask me all the time, who's my favorite artist? And I try my best not to answer that because number one, I'm friends with so many artists and I'm very close to a lot of very well-known name artists and I love their work. It's like asking you to decide food, am I gonna, it's so close and the intimacy with this, I love them all. However, conversely, contrary to what I just said, Lynette's work means so much to me because it encapsulates visually everything that I've talked about the human condition, the human identity. Her works are bodily and they're figurative and they're incredibly facially expressive, but I don't think about those things when I see the work. I feel something. So I don't want to touch the sexy skin and I don't want to look at this, these images where there's this tiny waist woman and these big broad hips and she's this perfect idea of what a Black queen, and those are gorgeous in these commercial ways. And I'm not disparaging those types of images as much as I'm saying we have to get out of just thinking of ourselves physically. And you can do that still thinking of yourself as a physical being. So Lynette focuses on the interiority of a person, even though she's exploring this external representation. She, just like Kwame Akoto-Bamfo, who's also from Ghana, and she's Ghanaian, British Ghanaian, she is concerned with almost this moment before the moment, the in-between places, not so exaggerated. If it's a full movement of a dancer, she cuts it right in the middle of that movement, and it's almost photographic in a sense. But beyond photography that only can capture that moment, she seems to capture an entire mood, an entire thought process, an entire technical and theoretical framework within her work, within that canvas. So you see everything. I see hours upon hours of her production in these works. The large scale ones, I saw some of the larger scale pieces for the first time a few years ago, and I literally wept. The last time I wept at work like that was when I saw the David in Florence by Michelangelo at the Accademia. And then again, to see it embodied in this Blackness, in these beautiful shades of brown, in these expressions that she does not actually take from real people. She's not using models, she's not using photographs. She's creating, and if she is using photographs, she's using several photographs to make a composite portrait. So these are not portraits that identify anyone. They're the idea of a human within a body, and they're Black. You don't look at anything she does and you don't want to just fetishize it. You don't just want to sexually abuse it. You don't want to see what kind of money you can get off of you making it. You want to sit and have a conversation in a way that you can only have with another human. And that is what is so amazing about her work. I'm afraid it's what a lot of people miss, but that's okay. If they look at it long enough, it will come to their minds as well. And that's why Black life matters. It matters. It has to matter to us. It has to matter to how I am rendering you on this canvas. It has to matter to me how I'm telling your story, Martine, if I write about you, or when I'm speaking to friends. How do I speak of you? How do I treat you in my house? How do I treat you at your business? How do I treat you in the community? Like I tell someone, I don't understand. I love Gucci and Prada and indie like anyone else. But I'd be damned if I walk past Tyrone's studio, who makes a suit better than anybody from here to Milan, and bypass his salon to go pay Gucci. I have to go see about Tyrone or Kwame or Auntie Esther, whoever the person is, or Jean-Michel, who is making the garment, because I have to invest here first before I go anyplace else, because here is when the most has been taken from. And if you are producing something amazing here, not only do you have my praise and my adulation and my support, but you get my money. You get it 1,000 times more than I would give it to or Ralph Lauren or a Jeff Koons artist or anybody else. I'm going to see about you first, not only because your work is oftentimes superior, but because who you are, what you've been through, and the fact that you're even here within your body to live and tell the story lets me know that there's something within you that can withstand ancient years of oppression and still live. I have to support you first. I have to, because I can't wait for that other person, that outside force that is dependent on you to be skipped over so they can stay in front of the line. That's how it works. So I have to preach, teach this knowledge of it. I think people think of it far too complicated. If they simplify it just like that, I think we'll have more patience within our community. We'll understand why certain things are the certain ways, and then we'll start building this community. So Lynette's work in this trans-global Blackness, I don't know if these people are from Morocco, because I lived in Morocco for 6 months and I saw indigenous Moroccans who look just like me, who have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years through the trans-Sahara slave trade, which no one ever talks about, which happened.
No one talks about that.
No one talks about that one. And the things that, we glorify different groups and different places and don't even know those stories that created certain situations that exist now. But from Morocco to Dominican Republic to Colombia to the south of France to South Africa to Gary, Indiana, these people that she creates can exist anywhere. I don't have a nationality. I don't have this border, this false border between me and you from Haiti. I'm from the US, or I'm from the US, you're African, I'm Black. All of that kind of nonsense erases within her work and it collapses. So I have to look at the heart of the matter, the humanity, and look at it. It looks a lot like me and you and them. That's what that work does. And it does a lot of things too, historically and technically. I won't get into those things within the canon. She's in dialogue with the canon of Western art history, also within the canon of ancient art, African art practices. And that's another conversation, because that's a book to write perhaps. But that's why I love Lynette. And I'm gonna declare it, she and somebody else, an artist by the name of Kajal, my favorite artist.
And I'm trying to understand, at what point did you really have to listen to your inner voice? that was pushing you towards this life's work?
If you were expecting Danny to answer, he's not answering. Or at least he's not answering until next week, because this is what we all dread. It's the open loop. Not to worry, come back next week so that you could catch up on the second part of our talk with Danny. All right, until then, check you later.